So it was quite a long journey, actually, in terms of I love reading, have always loved reading. And then I got involved in the nonprofit sector. And initially, I started working with unemployed youth. And we started a library, and we really wanted to get young people to start reading in English so that they could improve their communication skills for interviews and that kind of thing. And as we got book donations in, we started to realize a lot of those books had absolutely no relevance to the lives of young people in rural communities. And obviously we wanted people to read broadly, but initially I thought it would be so lovely to have a book that really spoke to young people and young women in particular in a rural context like Zululand. So that was kind of the start of thinking about of writing a book. And then as kind of time went on, I think I mentioned to you that my parents were involved in a game farm for a very long time, and we had 6 rhino poached. So the story started to kind of take shape around the issue of rhino poaching in Zululand, but also then the context of people living on the periphery of game reserves and having no real access to them. And yet we expect those people to feel strongly about conservation when they've never personally seen a rhino or an elephant or whatever it might be, yet they live right on those fence lines. So yeah, it was kind of a number of instances that kind of, or context that spoke to me, and then how would I bring it together in a fiction form? Yeah. So Down at Jika Jika Tavern is about a young anthropologist. She's a student and she returns home for the summer holidays to her where her parents work at a private game reserve in Zululand. And in the first week that she's there, her father is accused of rhino poaching, and it's a crime she knows he would never commit. He's a conservationist at heart for the past 25 years, and she knows this is not something that he would do. So in her search to prove his innocence, she's completely unaware that there is a conflicted Sangoma or traditional healer in the background who is trying to get revenge on what he considers to be the great betrayal of his life. And he collides with a slippery rhino poaching boss who is trying to promote his business in the Zululand area. And Nontle finds herself having to figure out how she's going to prove his innocence, but then gets sucked into this underworld. And in the process, her own life is at stake, and she has to draw on all of her resources to prove his innocence and come out of this situation alive. So my creative career actually started straight out of school. I studied graphic design for 3 years, and during that time, really realized that I didn't want to be a graphic designer, but I was 2 years in and I thought, well, I can't quit now. So I continued studying graphics, finished that, and very, very thankful that I did do that, because about a year or two later, government was running its first CETA programs, and MAP CETA, which was for the creative industry, put out a call for young people. If you had a 3-year qualification in some form of design, it could have been graphics or textiles, whatever it was, they were looking to place you in a rural community so that you could combine your skill as a designer with the skill of a woman who craft, it was weaving either ilala or grass or whatever it might be. So I applied for that scholarship, that learnership, and got accepted. And that really was the start of my real passion for trying to combine creativity with social development work. And then that led to a master's in anthropology, because I went back to UKZN and I started to study anthropology. And through that, really realized that I absolutely love social development work and meeting people, hearing their stories, and figuring out how we can work together, bringing both sets of skills. So not going in as a savior who has all of these really great solutions to your problem, but how do we work together to find solutions for the social inequalities that you face? So much of my art is around depicting those stories. I really believe that art is a great vehicle to start conversations more than just sitting around a table with no reference. I think if you can, if you go into a boardroom and there's this massive painting that really depicts some beautiful social scene, and it's not always, doesn't have to be sad or depressing. It's really how people live their lives in that context and the celebration of that. And I find that paintings really do generate those conversations because people immediately want to know why you painted that. And then you get to tell that story. And it's that background story that actually really helps people to just love that painting more, if that makes sense. They really come away with a sense that they're not just buying a painting, they're buying a story. So I think that for me is, how do you combine creativity for social change is really kind of a mantra that I live by. Great, thanks. So I learned to live in Gifundela Ukupila. We are based actually in a rural community between Empangeni and Eshowe in KZN. So it's about 2 hours from Durban. So I learned to live actually out of my anthropology degree. I had been volunteering for a couple of years with another nonprofit in the area. And every December, January, when we would take on new families into that nonprofit, onto their database, we'd interview each family and interview the kids. And I always seemed to get the kids who were in matric and had this magic matric certificate, but then there was nothing for them to go forward with. They didn't know how to access tertiary, or they simply didn't have the marks, or they just felt like they had attained this, they'd reached their ceiling. And the aim of the nonprofit was to help them to breach that quite minimal ceiling, actually. So I learned to live to act as a bridge between those kids and the institutions of learning in the area, but quite quickly learned that actually the level of education that our matrics in rural areas receive does not in any way prepare them for tertiary. And it's not just education in terms of academics, but in terms of self-awareness, self-esteem, accountability, responsibility, all those soft skills which are just so important for going forward in life. So the nonprofit then started to look at the high schools in the area and to work with them and their grade 8s and grade 9s on social soft skills. And then we realized we actually have to keep going lower and lower and lower in terms of the age group of kids. So today, we work predominantly with primary schools, but also with some high schools. And our aim is to, at the center, provide a really safe, caring, nurturing environment where kids can come after school. They get a warm meal. We partner with another organization. We work on the same property. So between these two organizations, we provide a warm meal, and then children can access after hours. We have a computer center, so they can access computers and internet and do their homework and research. And that's really important because there are no computers in households in our rural area. And most schools don't have a working computer lab or any internet. So it's the only place where they can come to do that kind of work. And then our latest and most exciting projects are around robotics and coding. So we run a Saturday club where we have about 20 kids who come and they learn robotics and coding and music as well. We combine that with music lessons. And then during the week, we work at the primary school with 60 children in grades 5, 6, and 7, and they also receive robotics and coding. And the reason why we do that is we want children in rural areas to be able to have access to technology, understand the fourth industrial revolution and the need for these things in their lives and the importance of them, but also it creates opportunities for computational thinking, problem solving, critical thinking. So it's not about creating hundreds of coders. It's about just broadening and expanding horizons to what else is around and available to you if you start investing your time in that now. Yeah, so in terms of who benefits, it really is just the kids in our rural community. We're a very small nonprofit, and we partner with primary schools. So we predominantly work with schools that want to work with us. If you quite happy for us to come in and do everything for you, that's not a partnership. So we have MOUs with principals, We work with the teachers. We have a partnership with UniZulu. So we really try and pull in other organizations that have skill sets that we don't, so that we can create an environment that provides really good services to kids in our rural context.